Well, hello and welcome. This is Watercolors Made Easy, and I am Elizabeth Zimmerman. And today I'm going to talk about the personality of watercolors. So, I believe that a lot of people get frustrated and intimidated by watercolors because they don't understand its personality. And so, I like to talk about that sometimes. So, I'm going to talk about that today. Watercolor and water, they really go together better than PB&J and mac and cheese. So you really need to understand how watercolor paints react to water in your paintbrush and in the paint and on paper, because that kind of dictates how watercolor will react to things, of course. So I'm starting out this painting with a wet on dry, as in the paper's dry and my paintbrush is wet with paint, and I mixed a whole bunch of different puddles of color of my watercolor paints before I started. And so I'm doing a wet on wet, and that's when your paper is wet, either water or paint, and your paintbrush is wet with paint, and the colors will just blend together and be really soft. But there also comes a time when the watercolor paper starts to dry, and as it dries, you'll see marks from your paintbrush. So if you monkey with it too much, it's not going to look as pretty. You're going to be overworking it. So there's a limited amount of time, usually, to work when your paper is wet. So in my sketchbook, I'm using, it is not 100% cotton. There is cellulose in it. And so it will react differently to the water and the watercolors than 100% cotton paper would. Right now, I am dropping in some yellow. Check that out. The yellow, the very wet, juicy yellow in my paintbrush kind of pushed the other color around. That's kind of cool about watercolors. But anyways, back to the paper. I used some washi tape to tape down the edges because I wanted a nice white border, and I just added some little clips to hold down the paper more flat. So traditionally I would tape down the paper to something directly, and because it's taped down, as the paper dries, it dries more flat than if it wasn't taped down. So that really helps too. So I couldn't do that in my sketchbook, so I use these little clips. So now I'm adding some more dark paint directly to the paper. It's nice and wet, and you can kind of see the paint pooling where the different ripples and little valleys are from when the paper is wet. And so sometimes you need to babysit it, but I'm not going to babysit it quite yet. I am working on mixing some more colors. So this is a starry night sky scene that I took a photo of at the very top of the pass at Glacier National Park. And so we were there, my dad and I were there, I think it was 1 o'clock in the morning taking pictures. Man, it was so clear and cold. It was in the middle of summer, but I think it was June actually. It was clear and cold, which means it's perfect for astrophotography, so photos of a night sky. And so I like to use my own photos a lot of times as inspiration. I like to relive experiences through my paintings, but I like to mix a lot of different colors. So I'm making like almost a black color on the top far right. Next to it is like a really dark purple color, and then I'll mixing like a dark green, and then I'll have like a dark blue. Because painting, you can liven things up. You don't need to paint exactly what you see. You can bring some colors to life by making it more colorful. It doesn't have to be a black sky. Check out this other video here about how I painted black labs with no black paint. That will kind of give you an idea. Anyways, back to the painting. So I'm adding some more of that yellow to really help liven up things. And then I believe that is nickel something yellow. I'll make a note for you. to make the Milky Way area, because there's like some yellows and greens in the Milky Way part. So I wanted to bring that up. And now I am wicking or lifting up some of the puddles of paint so that it's more evenly dry. And I'll even go around the washi tape at times and clean up any extra paint that's sitting on top of the tape, because the paint sitting on top of your paint could actually leak back out onto your painting and make these weird blooms, which you may not like. So my painting dried, and now I'm adding more colors on top. So watercolor is kind of cool because you can work with layers. When you do work with layers, you want to make sure the paint dries between each layer. Otherwise, you could be lifting the paint off the paper. So you'll see that I'm using like the green color, the purple, and the black color in different areas. And now I'm letting the paint kind of mix together on the paper and do its own thing. Because honestly, the hardest part about watercolor painting is letting paint do its thing. So watercolor is going to mix and mingle and kind of do its own thing. And that's literally the hardest part, is releasing control. Just giving it up and letting the paint do its thing. That is literally one of the hardest things about watercolor for people. And that's what makes it frustrating, because people don't like releasing control. It's hard. You want to be able to tell the paint to do what you want it to do. So now I'm lifting up some more of the puddles with the corner of my paper towel, because I kind of want a more even color. And these ripples are just kind of stuck in the paper, so I'm kind of babysitting it, making it work a little bit with me. I'm not like forcing the paint, but I'm kind of working with the paint. So just working on building some layers, some depth, really building that color to be bright and brilliant and deep. Watercolor does not have to be one layer of paint and be done. I mean, it can be, but being able to layer things, dry between the layers, can really build up more depth and vibrancy. The paints that I am using in this painting are all by M. Graham & Co. They are made locally in Oregon, which is awesome. I've been using these paints, I think, ever since I started learning watercolor about 20 years ago. So it's really awesome to have this great quality paint that's consistent. And it doesn't dry out all the way because there's honey in with the paint. And so I don't have to wait a long time for the paint to reactivate. And this paint, when you purchase it, it comes in tubes. And so I go through and I bought this little wallet, this little pan wallet off of Amazon, and I'll leave a link for that in the description, along with, I have an affiliate link for Blick Art Supplies. Blick Art Supplies. I have an affiliate link for them, and I'll leave that in the description as well for these paints. But I take the paint from the tube, put it in a pan, I let it dry out, air out for a couple days, and then I start using it. So that's how I use the paints, because watercolor is meant to be watered down. You can use it fresh out of a tube, but you have to be careful about not letting the paint work like acrylic, because watercolor is meant to be transparent, so watered down. How much water you add kind of dictates how light or dark the color is in the watercolors. So sometimes it's trial and error, playing around, working with different layers, building things up. Right now, you'll see I switched my paintbrush. This is a script or a liner brush. This particular brush I was given by my grandparents' neighbor. His wife was a ceramist or a potter. And so this was one of her paintbrushes that she used to do glazes. And it actually works really well for my watercolors. So right now you can see I'm adding more dark color, and I painted the paper, and I'm just adding more dark color and letting it kind of blend and do its thing. You can watch it spread and dissipate on the paper. So I'm just playing around. You can kind of see some of the brush strokes And the more that you would play with them in this stage, the more they'd show. So it really helps to just put your paintbrush down, do what you need to do, and leave it alone. Don't monkey with it, because it'll be looked way overworked. And you don't want it to look overworked, because then it loses that fresh quality. So here I am wiping the excess paint off of the washi tape. Okay, you can see how it's suddenly looked lighter. It's because the paint dried. I use the back of my hand to check how wet it is. And one of the ways to check is if it's damp, it's probably still, if it's cold, it's probably still damp. If it's not cold, it's probably dry. So I'm doing a wet on dry method. The paper's dry, and I'm just loading my paintbrush up with this dark, rich paint. You can see the paint just sits where I put it. It's just sitting there, waiting to be told what to do, or just is going to stay there. Next, you're going to see something how I will feather and soften the edges around the Milky Way area. So that will be in just a moment. But it's really fun to play with different colors in a night sky. So once again, I got this purple, a blue, a green, and almost a black color. Honestly, you don't need a lot of colors to do this. You just really need the primaries and a brown. So I use a blue, red, yellow. Those are the primaries. And sometimes it's fun to have extra paint. And honestly, watercolor paint lasts a long time. So here I am grabbing some more of that yellow, and I'm just bringing my brush with mostly water kind of to the edges, and that kind of softens the edge. Because that dark paint is still wet, I can kind of move it around, kind of push it around, show it where I want it to go, and go from there. So I'm just adding some more dark along what will be the silhouette of the peak and some trees. Because watercolor is transparent, you want to work light to dark, building up the darks. So once again, this dried some more. And now, since the paper is totally dry, I'm going to go in and do that I can't talk some days. Anyway, silhouette. And so I'm just shaping it out. I sketched it out in pencil first, so I had an idea of where it would be and kind of an idea of how I wanted the Milky Way to draw your eye into the painting, up from the top and then down towards the middle bottom. So this is this dark color. I like to make it with an ultramarine blue and a burnt sienna, and I just find that this dark color can make for a really dynamic black. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can look a little brown some places, a little blue some places, and just in between in others. So it's just playing around with mixing colors sometimes. I could even let some of that sky show through at the bottom, but I'm not going to. But that's a cool thing about painting, is that you can do it any way you want. You don't have to follow a certain rule or anything like that. You can just play around, add more layers, make it nice and dark. So I just picked up another liner or a script brush that's even smaller than the other one to do the little trees. I guess they're not that little. They look kind of big compared to the top of a mountain. So just adding these little touches. The painting could have worked okay without the trees, but just adding those trees really adds something. And now I'm adding even more dark paint on top of this mountaintop here. Just really make a deeper contrast with that yellow. So the high contrast is really dark next to a really light. And this is almost a really high contrast, because if you squint your eyes, you will see that the yellow area down there, it's one of the lightest areas in the painting currently. I do have some more tricks up my sleeve, which I'll be sharing with you. So this is all about the personality of watercolors. The watercolor is not spreading everywhere because the paper is dry. If the paper is dry, watercolor will stay where you put it. the paper is wet, the watercolor will blend and move where the paper is wet. So you really can control watercolors when you think out the process of where the water is, how much water on your paintbrush or on your paper. So here I am showing you some of my white gouache. So watercolor is transparent. You can let it dry out. You can add water. It starts working again. Gouache, on the other hand, well, it's a French term, of course, because a lot of art terms are French, but gouache is opaque. And depending on what type of gouache you have, you can let it dry out, add water, let it sit, and then you can start using it again in an opaque manner. So now I am using like a little splatter method. So I kind of watered down the gouache a little bit on my paintbrush, and I'm tapping it against my finger and letting it fall onto the paper, and does these little pinprick spots. So they're perfect for stars. You don't need a hand paint every star. You can kind of see, yeah, you can really see where the white gouache got on the paper where it was wet with the black paint for the mountainside. I'm not going to worry about that because that is bound to happen again. And so I will resolve it and show you how I fix it later on down this painting. You might have noticed that I have 2 cups of water. I like to use a water cup for like my dirty brush, and then try to keep the other cup of water mostly clean. So now I just grabbed a thicker, sturdier bristle brush, and I'm just swiping my thumb along the bristles loaded with the white gouache paint, and is making an even finer mist for those stars. So I've noticed when I do astrophotography, there's like these bigger, bolder stars, and then like this fine mist of stars in some areas too. So it's kind of interesting to see that. So now I'm just taking some dark paint, and I'm just going to apply it over where the white gouache got on it and moved it around. So I didn't sweat about it. I'm just like, all right, I'll fix that. Not a big deal. So time for some more white gouache. I'm going to hand paint some spots and do the tapping method. And once again, I got more white gouache on my wet black mountainside, but I'll fix it. So I'm trying to do the majority of the cluster along the Milky Way area. And once again, adding some more dark paint to my paintbrush to get rid of the white gouache on the mountainside. So if you are enjoying this video, my little talk over of the personality of watercolors and creating this little watercolor painting in my sketchbook, I would love for you to like this video. That helps other people find this video too. And if you want to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe, and that way you will know when my videos are live for you to check out. My videos are all about watercolor painting. I throw in some gouache painting, plein air. So plein air, once again, another French term. It means painting outside in the open air. I actually have a lot of fun doing that, and I've gotten the hang of filming myself doing it, so I like to share those videos too. I also have a couple different playlists for you to check out if you want to learn more basic techniques, or see some time lapses, or my plein air paintings. Check those out and see if you find something binge worthy. So here I am hand painting in some more stars. The brush I'm using now is a little tiny detail brush. I'll link some of my brushes in the description. Not all of them will be in there, only a couple, because like I mentioned previously, I was given some of the brushes I'm using, and so I'm not exactly sure where to find them. I do have an Amazon storefront that I will link, and I would love for you to use it. I get a small percentage of sales, which helps me buy more art supplies. I am also an affiliate for Dick Art Materials, and so I'm really excited for that partnership as well. Not really partnership, affiliate as well, because I also get a small percentage of sales, and once again helps me buy more art supplies. And you don't get charged anything extra, and you can see more art content in supporting me that way. So, time to rinse out the brush, make everything nice and clean, and I am just about to the end. Got to get rid of some of those stars on the mountainside. I mean, that kind of looks cool. It's like a reflecting galaxy in the mountain. Oh, look at that. I left that light area towards the bottom anyways, even though I said I'd get rid of it. Sorry, I forgot I left it, so surprise. But I'm really loving this deep, dark sky with the Milky Way. I hope you like it too. And I hope that this inspires you to play around with your paints. Don't be afraid to layer dark colors. Dark colors as in like purple, blues, greens, instead of just making a black. You can have a black that you made like the silhouette of the mountainside and the trees, but you don't need to have it everywhere. It can add some more vibrancy and interest to your painting. So, yeah, this was actually a lot of fun to paint. If you want to see like a daytime version of this painting, I will link that video here as well. I used white gouache in that painting too, and it's in this sketchbook, so you can kind of see it's a daytime friend. And the gouache was used for snow, so yeah, I would love for you to watch that one as well. So checking to see if it's dry. I like to make sure my paintings are dry before I peel off any tape so I don't accidentally smudge anything. And sometimes when paper is wet or damp, it's more likely to rip. So I try to be really careful. You can let the paper dry naturally, like in the sun or just sitting out and leaving it alone, or you can use a hair dryer. But be warned, if you use a hair dryer, make sure you do not have any masking fluid on your paper, and beware of how fast or slow you have it, because if you have it on too fast and there's a puddle, you're gonna make like splatter marks and you may not be happy about it. But unfortunately, that's just the way it is sometimes. So here's a watercolor. I am okay with this tiny little pinprick splatter marks on the mountain. You know, I think that looks kind of cool. Far away, you don't notice it, but up close, it's cool. So here's my palettes, nice and dirty, my paints, and of course, the painting. Well, thank you so much for joining. I hope this has inspired you, and I will see you in the next video.